Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the power of education and the Tainan case. This is a webinar, and my name is Peter Zoehrer, and it is my privilege, distinguished panelists and scholars, to introduce distinguished panelists and scholars and experts from Europe and the USA. I applaud Tainan for celebrating the United Nations International Day of Education. Let me just give you a little background to this. On the 3rd of December 2018, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution proclaiming the 24th of January as International Day of Education, in celebration of the role of education for peace and development. The right to education is enshrined in Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Let me cherry pick a few points of this article. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Second, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among nations, racial or regional groups. So I wonder if in many of the educational institutions, these points are emphasized in Article 26. There's one other very important point, especially now in the pandemic, in the COVID pandemic. The third point is parents have a prior rights to choose the kind of education that should be given to their children. Very important point. Let me just summarize. Education is a human right. So this is a very important aspect of this declaration. The declaration calls for free and compulsory elementary education. Free and compulsory elementary education. Second, education is a key to sustainable development. I'm sure you know there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as they call them, at the United Nations. And education is essential for the success of all 17 of these goals. So these goals are to be accomplished, hopefully. It also depends on us, to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Not just for some, for all. Not just for some privileged, but for all of humanity by 2030. Not such a long time to go. And third, challenges. There are many challenges to achieving universal education. Challenges like so education offers children a ladder out of poverty and a path to a promising future. 258 million children currently and adolescents around the world do not have the opportunity to enter or complete school. Can you imagine 285 million, 258 million children? They have no chance for the future. 617 million children and adolescents cannot read and do basic math. 617 million. 40% of all girls in the sub-Saharan Africa complete lower secondary school. 4 million children and youth refugees are out of school. Their right to education is being violated, and it is unacceptable. Without education and lifelong opportunities for all, countries will not succeed in breaking the cycle of poverty that is leaving millions of children, youth, and adults behind. So, education is a fundamental human right. This is what it says in the Article 26 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, just before we'll view 2 short videos, I just want to make one more point. I really commend Taijimen, the Taijimen movement, about their approach to education. I could see in their videos, in their publications, that one very important aspect for them is not just a general understanding about education, which means intellectual education. It is even more important to promote character education and education of conscience. Let me just say in brief, education of heart. Education of heart should be the priority in our educational systems. And then intellectual education is important anyway. Everybody knows that. But now, currently, the education of heart is neglected. That's a big manko, big problem in our educational system. And once again, thank you, Taijimen, for emphasizing this point. And you will be playing an important role globally if you continue this path. Now we shall see 2 short videos. The first video is a video from UNESCO about the future of education. And the second video is called Transforming Education with Love and Conscience. There you go. Transforming Education with Love and Conscience by Dr. Hong Tao-Tse from the Taijimen movement. He is the vice president of AWC, which means Association of World Citizens, which is an UN NGO with the ECOSOC status. So let's watch the videos. Thank you very much. Fabienne? Okay.
The futures of humanity and our living planet are at risk. We are at a turning point. Urgent action is needed to change course and transform the future. Everyone alive today has a tremendous obligation to future generations to ensure that their world is one of human rights, abundance, and not scarcity. Education is one of the key ways we address inequality, exclusion, and work on healing our damaged planet. But to transform the world, education needs to be transformed. UNESCO launched its Futures of Education initiative to bring the world together to reimagine how education can shape the future. Despite the urgency of action and in conditions of great uncertainty, we have reason to be full of hope. Education can help us make a peaceful, just, and sustainable world. For this, we need to renew education by asking, what that we do now should be continued, what should be abandoned, and what needs to be invented afresh. A new social contract for education needs to be built. Collectively, we must strengthen education as a global common good. Let's all work together in our communities and across the world to ensure that education best supports our shared futures.
Distinguished guests, educators, ladies and gentlemen, good day. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said, "We must do far more to advance Sustainable Development Goal 4 to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all." UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay emphasized, education is the cornerstone of the Sustainable Development Goals. If we fail on education, the entire structure of development will fall down. The United Nations designated January 24th as the International Day of Education, highlighting education as an essential building block for a healthy and vibrant society and for the promotion of world peace and sustainable development. The theme of this year's International Day of Education is Changing Course, Transforming Education, which aims to realize everyone's fundamental right to education and build a future that is safer, more inclusive, and more peaceful through important transformations. As stated in UNESCO's recent global report on the futures of education, transforming the future requires an urgent rebalancing of the harmonious relationships among people, between humans and nature, and a greater focus on human rights, equality, inclusion, and democratic participation in our lives and technology. Education is one of the most powerful tools for lifting people out of poverty, integrating them into society, and transforming their future. The recent changes in the world and the COVID-19 pandemic have had a significant impact on education in all countries. Human beings must break away from their old way of thinking and readjust their vision and hearts in order to unite and cooperate as we seek to secure the continued existence of all humanity. It is critical to ensure the right to education, equal opportunities, and universal access to education. UNESCO urges governments to meet their legal and political duties to provide quality education for all, and to more effectively implement and monitor education policies and strategies. Education is the tool to cope with the ever-changing world and the key to successfully achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. World leaders have the responsibility to establish an educational system that is in balance with our ecosystem to promote humanity's sustainable development. From birth, we have been learning, adjusting, and gaining revelations on our life journey. The environment and the various aspects of life are the lessons we need to face in the course of our growth. Individuals' thoughts of conscience and moral development are also important factors that affect the improvement or deterioration of the greater environment. War, social hatred, violations of religious freedom and human rights, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the imbalance in people's hearts are sources of disruption to sustainability, resulting in the victimization of all citizens of the world. Human rights violations by authorities have been prevalent, upsetting people's lives, stifling society's progress, and even jeopardizing humanity's survival. All these problems may seem difficult to overcome, but the solution resides in all of us. It is our conscience. Leaders in all fields around the world must follow their conscience, implement action plans with wisdom, respect human rights, implement the rule of law, realize true freedom and democracy, and create a peaceful and happy future. The core value of education lies in inspiring people's conscience and self-awareness, thereby shaping individuals and the landscape of future society. The most important education for everyone from birth to death is conscience education. The world faces multiple crises. Important values, such as morality, conscience, trust, and helping others, are on the decline. We are in an era of rapid changes, and people's minds and behaviors are changing along with it. The distinction, recognition, and choice between illusion and reality, truth and falsehood, as well as good and bad, have become common challenges for mankind. Conscience is a constant reminder for people to restore their true hearts, do the right thing, and make wise decisions. Everyone is an important educator of conscience. Everyone should respect, tolerate, understand, forgive, appreciate, learn from, and care for one another. Each kind thought and each good deed can have a critical influence on global citizens' well-being. High-quality education is the foundation on which a society functions, and a true high-quality education is one based on love and conscience. In the ever-changing material world, getting to know one's true self and following one's innate conscience are critical in altering humanity's future. Awakening of conscience is the soul of education. Conscience guides us toward the right path of life, like a compass. Thoughts and acts of conscience shape people's personalities, which collectively become a society's value system and form a country's culture. Today's education shapes tomorrow's world. Conscience education is the cornerstone for helping mankind achieve true freedom. Educators should emphasize the importance of conscience during the course of education. Implementing conscience education is the most crucial and practical approach to quality education. Only a conscience-based education philosophy can find a way out for the chaotic world and restore the opportunity for the sustainable development of the earth and humanity. Since 2014, I have been working with our global members to promote the movement of an era of conscience, which has created a whirlwind of conscience around the world. Starting in 2018, we worked with many permanent missions to the UN on the resolution promoting the culture of peace with love and conscience, which the UN General Assembly adopted on July 25, 2019, designating April 5th as the International Day of Conscience. We sincerely appreciate educators' hard work. We also wish the promotion of an era of conscience movement and the International Day of Conscience will continue spreading conscience-based social education through the internet, as only conscience-driven education can usher in a bright future for humanity. Let us sow the seeds of conscience in education, saving the world with conscience education. May the lighthouse of conscience show the way, inspiring all and ushering in hope. Thank you all.
Now, let me introduce our next speaker. His name is Mr. Willy Fautré. He is the director and co-founder of Human Rights Without Frontiers in Brussels. Human Rights Without Frontiers was established about 33 years ago, so it's quite old for an organization, very established. And for my colleagues in the media, my journalist colleagues and human rights activists, they call Willy Fautré the European Mr. Human Rights, and it's rightly so. Also, he co-founded the Women's Federation Without Frontiers, which has many made aware of what has been going on especially in China, with forced abortions, etc., etc. I was very shocked by their reporting. So, without further ado, Willy Fautré, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. It's only recently that the UN has decided to commemorate the importance of education. Indeed, as it was already said before me, it is on the 3rd of December 2018 that the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution establishing the date of 24th of January as the International Day of Education. Not only because education is a human right, but also because it is a public good and a public responsibility. Once is not customary, but in this webinar today, I will speak about myself, as education is intrinsically linked to my personal life, and my message will be mainly addressed to the Taijimen Dizi. What I am doing now in the field of human rights and the freedom of religion is the result of the action of a number of educators who shaped my conscience, my access to culture and knowledge. I have a full career behind me as a teacher of foreign languages, as a pedagogical researcher, as a defender of linguistic minorities, as a trainer of young teachers, as a former chargé de mission at the cabinet of the Ministry of Education in Belgium, and also at the Belgian National Parliament. I was born in a modest family with limited cultural and intellectual abilities. Having experienced 2 world wars, the school education of my parents had been limited, but they gave me a taste for learning. They taught me to read, and even before going to primary school. They encouraged me to visit the local public library. They also shared their concerns for social justice throughout all my youth. A teacher in my primary school, Mr. Maurice Bernard, laid the main foundation of what I am today. Every day, we had to read a newspaper at home to report about a national event and an international event in front of the class, and to show where it took place on the map of my country, Belgium, and on the world map. This is what I go on doing every day. Every day I read a lot of news on internet, and I share my knowledge about human rights, freedom of religion or belief, and injustice around the world with 10,000 policy makers and influential actors through our daily newsletters. My classroom is now the planet, and it is in this global classroom that I share the painful experience of Taijimen with the Taiwanese authorities. For several years, another dynamic teacher in a secondary school, Mr. Denis de Sierre, consolidated my linguistic skills, but also shared his personal values with us teenagers. When he died in an accident, I shed warm tears because I had abruptly and painfully lost a mentor and a spiritual father. Because he had shared with me the linguistic tools I needed to communicate with the world in all its diversity, to listen to people's plight and to share it with others. A teacher does not only teach to students, but he can and should also be taught by his students. This has been the main experience of my life. In the early years of my teaching career, I was an atheist militant, and I happened to talk about faith, science, and atheism with one of my students, a young and modest female teenager who was half my age. She was Protestant, and her name was Marilyn Bury. Through her testimony, I became a Christian, although a few years earlier, I had written in my personal philosophical diary, and I quote, "If I ever become a Christian, I will have to be prevented from it because it will be a sign of mental illness," unquote. In addition, through my students sharing with me of the book Tortured for Christ, written by a Romanian pastor named Richard von Brandt, I was made aware of the persecution of Christians in communist countries, the USSR, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on. This is how the atheist that I was became a defender of Christians, of all denominations first, and later on, of believers of all faiths. I hope to meet her again one day to tell her how much she influenced the lives of tens of thousands of people in need of justice when she shared her beliefs and books with me several decades ago. Afterwards, pastors took over my religious education. I was awkwardly shy when I was a teenager and a young adult. I thought I would never be able to overcome this weakness. But by feeling the necessity to stand up publicly for human rights and religious freedom, by becoming the voice of persecuted people, I managed to overcome this huge difficulty. Never believe that something is impossible for you, Taijimen Dizi, who follow the moral teachings of Dr. Hong. You can change lives, the present and the future, whatever your claimed limited abilities and disabilities. I'm using this commemoration of the UN International Day of Education to pay tribute to anonymous people who deeply influence my whole life and the lives of thousands of people. They were never aware, and they will most probably never know, that a word that they once said, a few lines they once wrote, a book they once shared with someone, or a conversation they had with a person in need, changed a life forever, and maybe many more lives. You, Dizi, are following the teachings of Dr. Hong and putting them in practice. They are rooted in two major principles: peace, and love. Sow these seeds around you, and you will see miracles in you and around you. Teaching is intrinsically based on sharing. I repeatedly use that word in my presentation. That's why the conclusion of my message to the Dizi will be, share what you are, and you will multiply what you are. Share what you have, and you will multiply what you have. Share what you know, and you will multiply what you know. Share what you believe in, and you will multiply what you believe in. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fautré. That was excellent. Always the personal testimony is most powerful to make the point. And you really made the point here. Let me introduce our next speaker. His name is Mr. Pier Luigi Capra. He's the secretary of the Union of Carabinieri. That's military police for Piedmont and Aosta Valley. So I find it's very comforting that the secretary of the Union of Carabinieri and of the military police is making profound statements about education. That is very comforting. So, Mr. Pier Luigi Capra, the floor is yours.
I don't know whether Mr. Capra, in his area, there was a computer problem, so I don't know if he has been able to reconnect. So if Peter agrees, I will propose the following, that I will do my paper first, and then we see whether Pierluigi Capra is able to reconnect. If he is not, we have his written paper in Italian, and I can read it directly in English translation, if this is okay, Peter.
Yes, absolutely. This is a good idea to solve this problem.
So I will...
Go ahead.
Thank you. I will start with my own paper, and then we will give another try if Pierluigi Capra is able to reconnect. It seems he has no audio. It should be told he should unmute himself. Anyway, that is my own paper. As you see, I'm in a garden in sunny central Italy. And but I want to talk about the delicate subject of freedom of education, starting from a famous sentence, decíamos ayer, as we were saying yesterday. These are very simple Spanish words, but both them and their Latin version, dicebamus externa die, came to embody very deep truth about freedom of education. Many teachers, when we meet our students daily, we start our lessons with a summary of what was said in the previous lesson. So, as we were saying yesterday. However, these words acquired a very deep and in fact, even a tragic meaning on January 29, 1577, when the Spanish astronomer, theologian, and poet, Fray Luis de Leon, pronounced them when starting his daily lesson at the University of Salamanca. Probably many of you today have never heard of Fray Luis de Leon, but you should, because as an astronomer, he was one of the main consultants who created for Pope Gregory XIII the Gregorian calendar. And the Gregorian calendar is the calendar we all use today. He solved the problem of the leap years by eliminating 10 days of October 1582 from the calendar. So in that year, the day after October 4 was October 15. If somebody tells you something happened on October 10, 1582, that's impossible. This day never existed. And also he established precisely when exactly February should have 29 days rather than 28. So we are all using the findings of Fray Luis de Leon. But the words, as we were saying yesterday, pronounced by Fray Luis in 1577 did not refer to the previous day. De Leon's previous lesson had been in March 1572. That's almost 5 years before. And after March 1572, he had not been able to continue teaching for the good reason that he was in jail. He had been reported to the Inquisition for alleged heresy and arrested for rather obscure reasons, largely due to the envy of other teachers in the same university. Because he was innocent and eventually was cleared of all charges and rehabilitated and started teaching again. So we don't know whether he said the famous words in English or in Spanish, but their meaning was clear. He continued to teach as if his years in jail had never existed. He was solemnly stating that you can put a teacher unjustly in jail, but you cannot stop his educational mission. And by the way, the same words, explicitly inspired by Fray Luis de Leon, were pronounced by French historian Gustave Cohen when he returned to Sorbonne University in Paris in 1944, from which he had been excluded as a Jew after the Nazi occupation of France in 1940. And Cohen, too, started his lesson with, as we were saying yesterday, meaning that once again, education and freedom had defeated the persecution. Perhaps Dr. Hong Taozi, the leader of Taiji Men, did not start his first speech to the Dizi, his disciples, with the words, as we were saying yesterday, after he was released from jail. He had been unjustly kept in prison for 117 days based on false accusations, as the highest courts in Taiwan eventually recognized. But he could have very well pronounced these words. Subsequent events proved that keeping him in jail for so long had not brokered his determination to teach that love ultimately prevails over hate, and conscience, as we heard, is the moral compass of all human activities. The notorious prosecutor Hu Quanzhu and others who put Dr. Hong in jail had precisely the purpose of preventing him from teaching, putting an extraordinary experience of education to an end. But they did not succeed. Dr. Hong was recognized innocent of all charges and was able to continue to teach and educate generations of Dizi. Yet his enemies did not give up. They continued to harass Dr. Hong and Taiji Men by repeatedly putting him under travel bans, even after he had been declared innocent by the Supreme Court, and issuing ill-founded tax bills, one of which for the year 1992 eventually led in 2020 to the seizure, unsuccessful auction, and confiscation of sacred land intended for a Taiji Men self-cultivation center. Many features of the Taiji Men case are difficult to understand for non-Taiwanese scholars, whose main question when they learn about what happened is why. Why were a movement and a leader highly praised by subsequent presidents of Taiwan persecuted? We know that they were victims of a politically motivated crackdown that hit several religious and spiritual movements in connection with the first presidential elections in Taiwan, which took place in 1996, and after which spiritual leaders accused of not having supported the winning candidate were persecuted. However, while the 1996 elections offered the context and pretext, my feeling is that there was in Taiwan a group of bureaucrats and politicians who wanted to keep alive the system of social control of the martial law era and could not tolerate the independent education Dr. Hong was offering. It taught his Dizi to think independently, think with their own heads. This made the Dizi better citizens, but this is not something authoritarian bureaucrats are normally prepared to tolerate. So they try to destroy Taiji men. And the after effects of this hostility are still at work in Taiwan today, where the Taiji men case is still not solved. So all those who love and cherish freedom of religion or belief and the freedom of education should continue to insist that the case should find a solution, as we were saying yesterday and will continue to say tomorrow until the case is solved. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Introvigne. For those who don't know him, Dr. Massimo Introvigne is the founder for the Center of Studies of New Religions of CESNUR. He is the editor-in-chief of Peter Winter magazine, and he wrote about 70 books and about hundreds of articles. So because of technical problems, we got a little bit messed up, and I didn't introduce him in the beginning. But now, I guess we are ready for Mr. Pier Luigi Capra. Is that correct?
Okay. Yes.
I introduced you
good
already,
afternoon.
sir. Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good evening for all. Thank you for CESNUR, to Human Rights Without Frontiers, for today. I'm a Marshal of Italian Carabinieri and the Secretary General of the Military Union for Piedmont and Aosta Valley in Italy. I speak a little English for this motive. The Dr. Introvigne translate to me. Thank you very much. Dalla costituzione del sindacato dei Carabinieri ci occupiamo, fra le tante cose, oltre che della tutela dei diritti, anche della promozione di eventi culturali e di eventi sensibili al dialogo interculturale ed interreligioso. Sotto questo punto di vista abbiamo intrapreso una collaborazione con Fede Insieme mediante contatti con l'avvocato Francesco Curto. È proprio mediante l'avvocato Curto che ho avuto conoscenza del movimento Taiji Men e del suo apprezzato fondatore, il dottor Hong. È stato proprio l'avvocato Curto che mi ha portato a conoscenza di questo movimento.
So, in fact, since its establishment, my organization has not dealt exclusively with matters of interest to the military, but has also promoted cultural events, including some in cooperation with Fede Insieme, the organization founded by attorney Francesco Curto, about intercultural and interreligious dialogue. And it is through Francesco Curto that I became acquainted with Taiji Men and its respected founder, Dr. Hong Taozi. And it is Francesco, he really introduced me to the activities of Taiji Men and the Taiji Men case.
Condivido con voi la passione di trasmettere una cultura di pace nel mondo e trovo prezioso l'operato del movimento laddove si fa promotore di condividere i più alti valori umani. È sicuramente degno di nota, è importantissimo la promozione dei valori del buon cittadino, iniziative che trovo fondamentali in un mondo in cui i valori tendono alla degenerazione.
I share with you a passion for transmitting a cultural peace to the world. Taiji Men carries out a precious work and should be commended for its efforts to share the highest human values. I was also impressed by Dr. Hong's work through the Association of World Citizens for the promotion of the values of good citizenship. I found this particularly inspiring as we are living in a world where the values of citizenship are at serious risk of being lost.
I modelli culturali di riferimento delle società moderne, sempre più connesse e complesse, hanno profonde radici nelle regioni antiche e nelle regole sociali per la pacifica convivenza. Pertanto ritengo che vadano assolutamente tutelati. Per quanto appunto attiene l'ambito spirituale, che di fatto permea tutto reale, è una dimensione che è stata fondamentale per lo sviluppo dell'essere umano, tanto per la coscienza quanto per la conoscenza di ogni uomo.
The cultural models of reference in our modern societies are more and more complicated and interconnected between themselves. Yet it is still possible to recognize their roots in ancient religious and spiritual rules, which are essential for social harmony. And the work to protect these roots is essential. I agree that spiritual sphere permeates all reality and is a fundamental dimension of the development of all human beings through conscience and knowledge.
L'obiettivo, da quello che è stata la mia comprensione del movimento Taiji Men e del dottor Hong, è sicuramente un obiettivo di assoluto rispetto. È un obiettivo assolutamente ambizioso, quindi come tutti gli obiettivi ambiziosi, credo, non privo di ostacoli. Abbiamo tuttavia la fortuna di vivere in un'epoca di società democratiche in cui i cittadini possono esprimere le proprie opinioni in merito alle varie tematiche.
The goal of the Taiji Men movement and Dr. Hong then is a very worthy one. It is also very ambitious, and as all ambitious goals, is not without obstacles. But we are fortunate to live in democratic societies where citizens can freely express their opinions on various issues.
Ciò è possibile attraverso varie forme di partecipazione, quale ad esempio l'impegno politico, non ultimo quello sindacale di cui io stesso mi occupo. E queste sono solamente alcune delle forme di partecipazione a disposizione dei cittadini che, ci terrei a sottolineare, in forma assolutamente pacifica, dialettica e con contenuti culturali, manifestano i loro più nobili effetti sulla società.
This is possible through various forms of participation, including politics, trade unions, that's my field, or peaceful demonstration with emphasis on peaceful. There are just some of the many forms of social participation available to citizens, and they produce their noblest effects on society when a peaceful dialogue between different points of view is allowed.
Questa eterogeneità permette quindi ad ogni persona di esprimere il proprio impegno su diversi livelli. Inoltre, tutte queste forme di partecipazione sono accomunate da un'importante rilevanza pedagogica, ossia sono in effetti importanti strumenti di educazione per una cittadinanza attiva in una società democratica, perché comunque lo sappiamo e lo sappiamo bene, la partecipazione è un elemento di stabilità democratica e che lo sia è sicuramente riconosciuto e messo in rilievo anche a livello internazionale.
This plurality allows each person to participate in the social life at different levels. Moreover, all these forms of participation share an important educational relevance, i.e. they are important tools of education to active citizenship in a democratic society. We all know that participation is a fundamental element of democratic stability, and this is recognized and emphasized as a value at the international level.
Ogni cittadino ha quindi il diritto di esprimere le proprie opinioni, nel rispetto ovviamente del diritto vigente in ogni paese, ci mancherebbe, su ogni questione però che lo riguarda. La partecipazione quindi è un diritto, ma non solo. È un diritto ma è anche un dovere, perché è un principio di azione negli ambiti della promozione della salute, del lavoro, dell'educazione, della tutela dei diritti civili.
Participation means that all citizens have the right to express their opinion in accordance with the laws in force in each country on all issues that affect them. Participation is not only a right, it is also a duty and the principle of action in fields such as health promotion, education, protection of civil rights, and so on.
La questione, entrando nel delicato, le questioni giudiziarie del movimento Taiwan del dottor Hong, nell'esaminarle sono emersi evidentemente dei paradossi. Ho preso qualche appunto su tutte, sicuramente la violazione del principio di uguaglianza, cioè quel principio in base al quale deve essere applicato lo stesso trattamento, sia pur di carattere fiscale, al verificarsi delle stesse condizioni e circostanze. E non ultimo del principio della coerenza dell'ordinamento giuridico, cioè la non contraddizione fra atti e norme in un sistema giuridico. E pongono sicuramente tutti noi nella condizione di dover ragionare su questi strumenti di partecipazione e sulla loro importanza.
So the legal and administrative case that has involved Dr. Hong and Taijimen is an opportunity for all of us for considering the instruments of social and political participation and their importance. And the Taijimen case, as I studied it, is full of paradoxes. We see there the violation of the principle of equality, the principle according to which the same treatment must be applied under the same condition and circumstances, including in the field of taxes. And we also see there the violation of the principle of coherence of the legal system, meaning the non-contradiction between acts and norms within the same legal system.
Sensibilizzare l'opinione pubblica su questi aspetti è sicuramente un aspetto molto rilevante e quindi coinvolgere alte professionalità internazionali a intervenire su questi importantissimi argomenti. Proprio il caso Taijimen evidenzia come dal 91 al 96, con eccezione del solo 92, il denaro contenuto nelle cosiddette buste rosse sia stato considerato una donazione e quindi soggetto a un certo regime fiscale. Mentre per quanto attiene il 92, il regime fiscale applicato è totalmente differente.
It is important It is important to raise public awareness on this aspect. It is useful to bring this case to international attention through the intervention of scholars and NGOs. For all years, 91 to 96, with the exception of 92, the money contained in the red envelopes given by Taijimen Dizi to their master was considered as gift and therefore tax exempt. Only for 1992, the tax regime applied was totally different.
Le questioni giudiziarie, se non erro, ad oggi sono concluse. Un militare, un buon cittadino rispetta le sentenze, ma un militare è un buon cittadino se sussiste un errore nelle modalità pacifiche che abbiamo evidenziato, può dare risalto e far comprendere comunque all'opinione pubblica la questione e le problematiche che derivano da questo errore.
Some could object that this legal case has been concluded and a good citizen or a military like me should respect the legal and administrative decisions. However, the principle of participation I have mentioned implies that a good citizen, even a military, confronted with an error of the administrative or legal system can peacefully activate the form of participation consisting in showing the error and its consequences and call for a rectification.
Essere dei buoni cittadini in questa nostra società è difficile, è sicuramente difficile. Promuovere valori nobili di una società di pace è difficile. Perseverare nelle attività, nell'impegno per la costruzione di una società di pace è difficile, ma non è impossibile.
Being good citizens is difficult. Promoting the noblest values of a society of peace is difficult. Persevering in the activities of building a society of peace is difficult, but it's not impossible.
Mi piacerebbe veramente vedere la risoluzione in tempi brevi delle problematiche del movimento Taijimen e del dottor Hong. E se posso, a mia volta esorto a valorizzare la figura del buon cittadino coscienzioso, rispettoso delle istituzioni, rispettoso delle norme, ma anche determinato nel saper tutelare i propri diritti nei modi pacifici e più nobili che ci sono consentiti. Il mio desiderio è anche di incontrarvi di persona quanto prima e consentitemelo, di porgervi anche un sincero ringraziamento e un buon proseguimento dei lavori. Thank you.
I would like to see the resolution of the case affecting Taijimen and Dr. Hong in the shortest possible time, and I urge Taijimen to continue to uphold the ideal of the good citizens, conscientious, respectful of institutions and laws, but also determined and brave when it comes to protect their rights in a peaceful and noble way. I hope to be able to meet you in person soon, and allow me to thank you and wish you a good continuation of your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all. Thank you, Professor Introvigne.
Prego.
Thank you, Dr. Pierluigi Capra. Very insightful. Now, let me introduce our next speaker, a colleague of mine, a journalist, and he is a director in charge of Bitter Winter, the Bitter Winter magazine. I had the privilege to get to know him in a very unlikely place. It was Nagoya in Japan at a media conference there. So, and we had some great time together there. And Marco Respinti, Mr. Marco Respinti, he can be regarded as the voice and the Peter Winter in general. Peter Winter, this magazine, Peter Winter, can be regarded as the voice of persecuted religious minorities who have no voice, those who have no voice, but they are loathed by dictators and authoritarian governments. Peter Winter is loathed. Dictators and authoritarian governments are afraid of Peter Winter. But they are loved by these religious minority groups who finally have a voice in Peter Winter. Recently, Peter Winter is often quoted in international media outlets, in the mainstream media, and it has a remarkable success, and it is covered in many different languages, and it is very, very hopeful and make a great contribution to human rights. And I'm so glad that Peter Winter is involved in, in promoting the Taijimen case. So, Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Time spent with you is always very enjoyable, let me tell everyone. And I'm very proud to be director in charge of Peter Winter, which you correctly described as the voice of the persecuted religions. And I'm very thankful to Professor Massimo Introvigne, who is a close friend of mine since ages, and he got me involved in Peter Winter. So publicly thank him for my involvement and giving me this professional and human possibility to try to better our society and the world we live in. As we already heard several times today is the United Nations International Day of Education, very important day. It is thus my pleasant task to introduce the second part of our today's webinar on Taijimen and education. Reflecting on education on such this day, I am immediately reminded of a great, although small book published in 1988, entitled Educating for Virtue. It is a collection of essays by some great American scholars, names like Claes Reen, Russell Kirk, and others, who make use also of the classics to address the topic educating for virtue and educating for liberty, which is the task first of families and free human association and groups and communities. Mr. Willy Fautré today showed the importance of all this through his personal life. In his turn, Professor Massimo Introvigne showed the same through the tale of Fray Luis de Leon. And Mr. Pierluigi Capra showed this again, focusing on the universality of the peaceful Taijimen experience. Please have for a second a look to Afghanistan today, for example, just to name a country which is in the news, where discrimination between males and females reigns. And beyond Afghanistan, ethnic and other reasons, often even religious reasons, that prevent some citizens from full education, making them Class B citizens. This is the spectacular opposite of educating for liberty. Thus, it fails to educate for virtue. I here connect to what Peter Zoehrer said in his opening remarks about the fundamental human rights to education. I culturally translate that concept into one which I hold dear, the right to truth. I, in fact, strongly think that people have the fundamental basic right to be educated because they have the fundamental basic right to truth. Thus, even on a practical level, they have the right to learn all the tools useful to grasp even rich truth. The Taijimen case enters here. People have the right, people all over the world have the right to know the truth about the staggering persecution of Taijimen, which is of course based on total lies already many times proven false. Now, back to our webinar. The second part will host several testimonies, both through videos and live in person. Some of these testimonies are Dizi or Taijimen disciples. I will introduce them one by one in seconds. But first, we will start with a brilliant video, an educational video in its noblest sense. It takes lessons from history and shows how the past always teach us for the present. Let's enjoy it.
The ancient Egyptian dynasty, with its pyramids and lion sphinxes, flourished for 3,000 years. The reason why ancient Egypt was able to maintain peace for so long was because of the taxation system. In Egypt, the tax burden was not heavy and the tax collection was very efficient. The tax collectors were responsible for this work. The peasants were taxed, according to the estimated harvest of the land area. The tax collectors were precise and fair in their calculations. They also had to check the people's crop stocks to check the taxes. Of course, there were also tax collectors who raised taxes on their own. They were called corrupt officials. Pharaoh wanted to protect the people and avoid corruption. If the poor could not pay the tax would be reduced by 2/3 of the amount. If the poor could not pay by all means, the tax would not be recovered. Ancient Egypt also had a monitoring mechanism. If a tax collector overcharged, he had to cut off his nose and exile to Arabia. But the best system still can't stop the corruption of the people. In late ancient Egypt, tax collectors pocketed their own tax money. The pharaoh had to raise the tax rate in order to make up for the deficit in the treasury. The peasants were unable to pay the high taxes and gave up farming, which resulted in fewer crops and insufficient tax revenue. The people could not live and work in peace, began to look for other reliance. At that time, the temple of Karnak was a temple for the worship of Pharaoh because the land and the harvest of the temple were not taxable. So people who could not afford to pay taxes fled into the temple. In the end, the tax revenue of the country was only 1/2 of the original amount. The reduced tax money became the power of the Temple of Karnak. When the Temple of Karnak declared its independence, ancient Egypt was torn apart. Finally, it was destroyed by a powerful country. A wise king for people-oriented, knowing the sufferings of the people. A good tax system can rejuvenate the country, make the country united and strong. Greedy tax officials, just like abhorrers, eating away at the nation's property. People's hearts are scattered. The great tree fell with a bang, the country is in danger.
Pretty interesting, as I announced, and all people should see it. So I really commend this video. And I now give the floor to our testimonials, and I will introduce them one by one. The first one is Mr. Chen Kun-He, City Councilman of Tainan City in Taiwan, and he will speak through a recorded video.
I am touched that after Taiji men has been subjected to an unjust tax for a long time, they still fight for the justice. What a wrongful treatment. What I found crucial is that not all victims have the leverage of time and money to fight for justice, which is unfortunate. To insist for justice step by step, this is a critical value for us. It is necessary for those of us who work in the legal profession to speak up when we see something unjust. If each of us is subjected to injustice, it is impossible for us to live peacefully in Taiwan's democratic society. Is our ruler abusing democracy, freedom, and human rights, despite the fact that we claim to be a democratic, free, and humane country? This, I believe, is the most serious topic. We live in a democratic country with freedom and human rights, But there is dictatorship, and even Dongchang and Xichang exist. When a dictator wants to kill you, he will use any means possible to persecute you. Is this a democratic and free country, then? You should continue to fight for justice, for any wrongfulness. After the others are acknowledged with the details, we shall support and collaborate with each other as anyone could be the next victim. Injustice may happen in different ways, and we shall support each other in any possible ways. Taiji Men is a legal organization. It's fantastic that they've been able to keep going for so long. It is the people, not the money, that can make it happen. In regards to the Taiji Men case, which has been ongoing for a long time, my firm has been aware of it from the beginning. I will echo them and agitate our ruler. Our constitution states that the people are obligated to pay taxes. However, the obligation to pay taxes must be imposed by law. The legislative yuan is in charge of enacting our laws. How can they break the law while levying taxes and reward with bonuses for tax inspections? Civil servants' salaries are paid for by the general public from taxes. When they investigate tax evasion, they received bonuses for doing their job. After the tax evasion investigation, the administrative agencies have the authority to interpret the law, and the highest administrative agency is in the Ministry of Finance. Consider this: he wants to tax you, and he has the authority to interpret the law. What happens when you file a lawsuit and go to our judiciary for interpretation? As a result, the most important target of our reform today is our judiciary. Because our judiciary is subordinate to our executive power, more than 99% of the interpretations of our laws are unfavorable to us. The winning rate for the trial is less than 2%. Citizens have nowhere to appeal their grievances. Hence, we must limit the continuous expansion of our executive power in our tax law. I, Kun-He, am here today to support Taiji Men, as well as all those who have suffered injustice. Victims shall speak out bravely and allow everyone to support you. We demand that our government, as a democratic country, follow the guideline of democracy and freedom instead of individual authority, or leverage authority implies for individual promotion or other types of benefit. To stop this, citizens must be enlightened.
Very important and very vibrant testimony. We have another one coming from another former city councilman of Tainan city in Taiwan, Mr. Wen-Zheng, and it's again through a video. Let's see it. It will, of course, come. Here it is.
About the reform of taxation, our dear like-minded fellows, I believe all Taiwanese who live on Taiwan's land, we all wish that taxation in Taiwan can be fair, reasonable, and legal. Of course, following the Taiji Men case, I urge our Taiji Men Dizi to stand up for justice. Let me start with the most basic example. The Holy Mount Zion Church and Yiquan Dao were both typical of religious persecution case in the past. In Taiji men, everyone is cultivating their minds, and everyone is practicing Qigong, seeking a healthy body. However, you can see even their property is impacted by religious persecution. As a result, this is an issue with the entire judicial system and government structure. Our reform is like our lives. We are constantly fighting, and it is impossible to assume that this government can make these things, such as human rights and security naturally. The effort, sacrifice, and dedication of many people have shaped the world's history. Only then will we be able to make our country and society. Thus I'd like to share this with our Taiji men friends here. Let me express my deepest gratitude. This Taiji men case is a tax tragedy, just like the 228 injustice. And you can see that similar cases and incidents still occur in Taiwan society. Therefore, we can't stop this kind of efforts. A lot of people feel as if a tax bill dropping from the sky or a debt coming out of nowhere has nothing to do with me. In Western countries, all the trouble that happened to the people are definitely the government's responsibility so that people can live a secure and safe life. As a result, today's efforts aim to allow our children and grandchildren to live on Taiwan's land, to live in this country without repeating the history of terror and horror. It is not that we should not issue you any fines, as we have been doing with our red slips, but nobody should predetermine, without any reason, that you will be fined 1 billion, 500 million, or several $100 million this coming year, therefore, making a tax revenue target. This not fair, right?
Right.
Today, because the Taiwanese government sets a tax revenue target, so the government workers are under the pressure to achieve this goal. I believe we are not just concerned about the Taiji men case. I believe that all the Taiji men Dizi care about not just themselves, but also about the reform of the entire tax system, and many of these circumstances in Taiwan have become the torture of our people.
We now turn to our testimonials in person, live in person today. And the first one is Mr. Cheng Yun-Hao, Asia Product Stewardship Leader and a Taiji man Dizi. Mr. Cheng Yun-Hao, the floor is yours.
Yes, Marco, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kenny. Actually, I'm working at a global company and responsible for product stewardship and regulatory work for Asia Pacific. Today is really my privilege and honor to be here and share my personal reflections on the International Day of Education, which is today, January 24. So when we look at the current global situations, there are continued fights among some countries from the religious and political conflicts. There are also increasing gaps between rich and poor, surprising climate change and global warming issues, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic that really negatively impact human beings and the environmental sustainability. But we are advocating to improve the global equity on education for the children, women, girls in Sahara region of Africa, and also the refugee children on today's International Day of Education, as the UNESCO advocates through changing course, transforming education. We also need to think from different perspectives to have the global social educations on the sustainability challenges that the human beings need to face. and the actions we need to take as an individual and for the whole global society. Dr. Hong Daozi, President of 4Power, Federation of World Peace and Love, has been leading the global efforts to promote the era of conscience. The movement of era of conscience advocates everyone to act from the individual's conscience with promoting love, peace, and human rights as the foundation to execute in our daily work and lives, and also to guide us how to deal with the global sustainability challenges. 4Power has dedicated themselves to promote those concepts of goodwill through cultural exchanges and performances across the globe to educate the people around the world in a conceptual but also a practical manner. As a Taiwanese, I would like to use Taiwan as an example. Actually, Taiwanese people had lived under the martial law for over 40 years, since the 1950s. People were brainwashed and were unconsciously aware of their fundamental human rights in that period of time, especially freedom, equality, and dignity. As you know, though the martial law has been dismissed for over 30 years, since 1990s, but the legacy of martial law still exists in our current judicial and tax law systems. So is that from the political situations or considerations by the politicians, the government continues citing improper judicial laws and illegal tax laws to oppress the people's freedom on religions and belief, which are also people's fundamental human rights. You can also tell from the recent Piedmont task force case that Piedmont has been suffering for more than 25 years, with a lot of international society's attentions, including you as scholars here from the bitter winters. And Piedmont has spent over 10 years and 7 months to go through 3 judicial trials and has concluded no fraud, no tax evasion, no violation of any tax laws on July 13, 2017. However, the Tax Bureau continued issuing illegal tax bills, and the Administrative Enforcement Agency even illegally auctions the Piedmont sacred land on August 21st, 2020. From the Piedmont case, it is realized that the Taiwan's taxation system and environment, as well as the protections of people's religions and beliefs, are still being oppressed, similar to where we were under the martial law period. Legal and tax reform, as well as human rights protections on the religions and belief in Taiwan, still have a long way to go, as we tell. Revoking Taiwan Piedmont's false case immediately should be the first step from this long journey. However, how come the Tax Bureau could still override the judicial authority for the tax cases, since all people should follow the conclusion of those 3 judicial trials? However, the Tax Bureau continued to overlook the judicial rights of the people. And it really shows that the administrative agencies are lack of educations of the rule of law and human rights. For me, actually my whole family are all Taiwan Dizi. And I do have a lovely wife, and I have 2 teenager kids who are still studying at college. They grow up in an environment with love and peace and human rights that has been created by Dr. Hong Daozi. My wife and I has been taking my kids to participate numerous of promotion activities for love, peace, and human rights since they were very small. For example, the movement of Era of Conscience, martial arts and cultural performances at the National Independence Day, and also the opening ceremony at the 2017 University in Taipei. And most importantly, to join the advocacy and even the demonstrations fighting for the legal and tax reforms. In my family life, we recognize that my kids, they are independent individuals. And we always fully respect what they think and what they act for life and study. My wife and myself, we don't need to worry too much about my kids because they can take care of themselves very well. I would say in summary, I'm very thankful to Dr. Hong, Daozi, who has instructed us, my whole family, very well. And we've been very supportive and positive to my educations to my kids. So legal and tax reform and protection of freedom on the religion and belief are very similar to the revolution of democracy. Through the consensus and collaborations among all the stakeholders, the power of revolution can be very strong. But how to reach good consensus in order to have good collaboration and synergize the power? Since this is not very socially convenient, so that a strategic education journey to raise people's awareness and understanding on judicial laws and tax laws relative to human rights and on tax-paying religions and belief are critical and essential. However, it is very regretful to learn that the government does not play the role of the public educations. On the contrary, government play the role of penetrators, which is very common and similar to the journey of the revolution of democracy. So Taijiman is sharing their personal painful experiences through various media channels and forums, hopefully to educate the Taiwanese people and to awaken the governments to trigger the legal and tax reform and inherently protect the freedom of people's religions and belief, like for our democracy. With that, in summary, today is the UN's International Day of Education. So we would like to take these opportunities to call for the immediate revoke of Taijiman false case by the Taiwanese government. We also request Taiwanese government to show their teeth to trigger the legal and tax reform. Review the government's violation on the international covenant on civil and political rights, and also the violations of constitution from the unjustified tax expenditory decrees. The government should protect the freedom of people's religions and belief as the fundamental human rights. This is to ensure Taiwan can be a true beacon of democracy in Asia. Furthermore, Taiwan can devote herself as a responsibly global citizen that support the international educations advocated by the UNESCO to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote long life learning opportunities for all, as well as deeply reconcile the global sustainability challenges we need to face and the actions we need to take together. Thank you for your listening. Back to you, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheng. Yun-Hao is always, this is my personal impression, it is always a pleasure, and it is important to hear Taijiman and Dizi testimonies as they are able to mix the personal insights and an objective reflection upon the case. It's a lesson that we should all learn from. Let's move to our fourth testimonial, Ms. Juselia Lin. She's a former advisor in a Taiwan economic think tank and a Taiji man, Dizi. Mrs. Lin, the floor is yours.
Hello?
Yes?
Yes. This is Juselia Lin. I was advisor of a Taiwan economic think tank. Today, I would like to share conscious culture education contributes to the country's economic development. Today, January 24th, is the International Day of Education. All people, regardless of class, race, religion, language, or location, have the right to education. Education helps to improve the level of national knowledge, develop the skills needed for the workforce, increase productivity, enhance economic growth, and promote peace. It also helps to eliminate poverty and hunger, improve health, promote gender equality, strengthen the rule of law, and the respect for human rights. So education is very important to the development of a country. As an economist, I have worked for an economic think tank in Taiwan, done general research on the global economy, and provided advice to the Taiwanese government. Taiwan's economy has indeed developed very well, thanks to the efforts of many enterprises. However, Taiwan is a shallow dish economy that is heavily influenced by the international economy. At present, climate change and human rights persecution have seriously affected our global economy, which is a common and urgent problem we need to solve. It is mentioned in Dr. Hong Daozi's Declaration of International Day of Conscience. An excellent culture is the foundation of a quality education, which is essential for sustainable economic development. This makes me understand that a good economic development of a country comes from education with a conscious culture. I am honored to be a Taijiman Dizi because all the actions and the words of my Shifu, Dr. Hong, have made me deeply realize that the meaning and the value of human existence is to self-reflection and help others, which is the precious wisdom of life. The cultivation of this wisdom comes from a good education. January 5th, 2006 is an important day for me to become a Taijiman Dizi. I am very grateful to Shifu willing to accept me as a Dizi. Since then, my fate changed. First of all, my body was originally very weak. I was often unable to stand for a long time, and my nose was allergic, which made my mood very unhappy. But since practicing Qigong, my body has become stronger and my mood has become more and more cheerful. Because I have become healthy and patient, I have a happy family and a happy life. I'm grateful to Dr. Hong for giving me the opportunity to participate in international conferences to actively spread the idea of love and peace, to promote world peace and conscience with love, and to interact with world leaders to broaden the scope of my life. What impresses me is that Dr. Hong has been invited to attend the International Conference of Chief Justices of the World in India for many years. And every year, Dr. Hong leads his Dizi to attend these very important conferences. I'm honored to have the opportunity to follow Shifu to attend the grand events in 2018 and 2019, and to meet with many justices and presidents of many countries and invite them to make a wish for love and peace and to ring the bell of peace, hoping that the world will be filled with love and peace and that human rights will not be violated. At the same time, because of the Taijimen case, in 2018, I invited some chiefs of villages of Wen-Zheng district in Taipei City to jointly sign legal and tax reform proposals and held a legal tax forum together to advocate the importance of tax human rights. I find out many chiefs or villages are aware that the legal tax environment in Taiwan needs to be improved, but due to the arrogant mentality of government officials, they are unwilling to admit their mistakes. They are afraid that after admitting their mistakes, it will not be easy to collect taxes from the people, which has led to a growing distrust of people towards the government. Although I'm an economist, I also have a partnership business. I have personally experienced the long-standing bad habit of Taiwan's National Taxation Bureau to ask companies to pay more tax. These tax officials are under pressure to perform and want to share bonuses. So they often approach companies near the fourth quarter of each year to find ways to levy more taxes. The most common way is to ask for more tax on the basis of other industry profit margins. They think it is abnormal for companies not to make money. So they demand that companies with suspicion of crime should pay more tax. All kinds of non-compliant practices show the immaturity of Taiwan's taxpayers' human rights, which also show that some of Taiwan's tax officials lack conscience. There are even a few unscrupulous officials in the Taiwan's government who use public power to persecute people for their own benefits and to gain promotion. For example, the Taijimen case is a typical case of human rights violation. The prosecutor, for his own official promotion, unlawfully prosecuted the case in 1996, causing Taijimen to suffer double damage from criminal and taxation. Although the criminal verdict of not guilty and no tax evasion was confirmed and received national compensation from the state for unlawful imprisonment, the prosecution of 25 years of illegal circular tax bills still existed. The holy place of practice was even illegally auctioned and nationalized. In Taijimen, Shifu guides us in conscience education of physical, mental, and spiritual health, practicing Qigong to make the body healthy, learning wisdom from practice, understanding self-reflection, correcting mistakes, gaining peace of mind, at the same time knowing how to give and help others, and knowing how to take heavy responsibilities to gain positive energy in the soul. Therefore, I donate to education-related charities in the nursery every year, and I also serve as an important volunteer in the education sector, such as the Vice President of a high school Parents Association and the Vice President of the National High School Parents Association, and so on. I also promote the era of conscience movements in some schools, and my company, hoping that Taiwan's education will develop towards a conscious culture education, which will really help the good development of Taiwan's economy. Taijimen is a group that promotes all people's physical, mental, and spiritual health. Such a good group, despite being treated unjustly by the government, still fights with the government for the justice of the law and the taxation with the heart of helping people in the world. The Taijimen case teaches us how to judge true and false, good and bad, right and wrong, and know the importance of human rights. If everyone knows the importance of human rights and work hard to protect them with conscience, then we can all live in a harmonious and prosperous world. Therefore, when the Taijimen case is being vindicated, then Taiwan's democracy will be a true democracy, and it will reach the beautiful state like everyone has conscience, the world is peaceful, everyone is joyful, and every family is happy. Thank you all for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nin. It is very important to add this economic insight to the whole thing. And it's very precious from someone really understanding what the truly economic side of the whole story is. Thank you for your important contribution. We now have another Taijimen Dizi, another testimonial. Mr. Daniel Lee is a CEO of IPR Group, Intellectual Property Rights Group in Taiwan. Mr. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Macro. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Daniel Lee. I'm also a Taijimen Dizi. I'm a patent attorney with over 22 years experiences in the intellectual property industry. I have worked as an engineer and a supervisor in the intellectual property department of large international corporations. And I'm also the founder, partner, and the CEO of an international intellectual property right group now. I worked the intellectual property industry, so I have to use the computer for a long time, which naturally caused wear and tear on my shoulders and neck and my muscle and bones, resulting in problems that are common among the modern people, such as shoulder, neck pain, back pain, and so on. So I joined Taijimen with my wife on the same day at the beginning of 2006. And above mentioned, the physical condition was improved very quickly after I joined Taijimen. However, the greatest reward of joining Taijimen is not previously mentioned. Since I started my own business in the same year that I joined Taijimen, and in the process of starting my own business, every struggle I experienced was something that I had never encountered in my life and never thought about. The meditation and the introspection I learned from Taijimen gave me the ability to break through the various difficulties I had in my business. I never thought that my team would be able to achieve something in the field when I started. Now, my team grows up very smoothly as an over 60 professional IP team, which have many famous and least enterprise clients now. It is really rare that the brother and sister in Taijimen are taught by my Shifu, Dr. Hong Daozi, to preach love and peace and education of conscience with positive energy, and to inject the clear stream into our world. My Shifu, Dr. Hong Daozi, always told me that I should contribute to the world. I have also had many opportunities to follow him to the international arena to promote the concept of love and peace and the culture of conscience. Include me, Taijimen, Shifu, and Dizi all sacrifice our holidays and money to participate in such meaningful activities. In process of helping others, in addition to seeing people being helped, make me happy, I also feel the responsibility of being a global citizen. There is absolutely no way to be good for one person, one country, but for everyone to be good. I can say that how lucky our world has Taijimen and my Shifu. However, such a giant group like Taijimen, which can help society and the world to improve the physical, mental, and spiritual health, was subjected to human rights persecution by government in a democratic society in Taiwan. In 1996, due to Taiwan government's anti-criminal action against the illegal religion, it made an unprecedented and assault act against Taijimen. The government has judicially prosecuted Taijimen for fraud, and the tax authorities issue tax bills with completely unproven prosecution materials simultaneously. After 10 years and 3 months of judicial review, the Supreme Court of Taiwan finally cleared Taijimen of any fraud, tax delinquency, or violation of the Taxation Act. Therefore, the tax case should be ended at this point. But the tax authorities in Taiwan ignore the court's ruling and fail to revoke the tax bill on their own in accordance with the law. Although the Taiwan's tax authorities lose every administrative litigation, the administrative courts do not decide on their own and give the tax authorities the opportunity to impose another appreciated punishment. So the tax authority still illegal issue a tax bill to Taijimen. In the end, they even illegally and forcibly auctioned off the land served from the Taijimen, the government violence that took place in Taiwan. Through the street marches, demonstration, and propaganda, Taijimen Dizi educated the public on the correct knowledge of the legal taxation so that the public can realize how to protect their legal tax rights. The Taijimen tax case is not unique in Taiwan. Many businesses and the people in Taiwan have suffered the same kind of persecution by Taiwan's tax authorities, but are forced to pay illegal taxes in order to ensure that their business can continue to operate smoothly. Therefore, through the concern of solidarity of domestic and foreign experts and scholars, we urge to correct the legal and tax environment in Taiwan so that the people can avoid living in fear. However, the Taiwanese government still ignore the people's voice for taxation and human rights. So I sincerely hope that all people in the world who are committed to upholding justice and the basic human rights can unite together to advocate for justice and the righteousness. And it is our common wish to uphold the human rights with universal values. It's my hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for adding your personal testimony. And it's always important to hear how the Taijimen, how much the Taijimen movement is a peaceful movement looking for nothing else than personal improvement, spiritual improvements, peace, harmony, and understanding. And this is very strident in comparison to what, for a quarter of a century, the movement itself has suffered for the mistakes, let us call them mistakes, by some branches or official of the Taiwan government. And Taiwan is a democratic country, very helpful in a very strategic area where democracy is almost absent, and so it should redress its wrongdoings immediately. Let's now move to our last testimonial for today, for this second part of our today's webinar. Ms. Kate Chen, Executive Assistant, and herself, a Taiji man, Dizi. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Chen, the floor is yours.
Hello, distinguished scholars and panelists. This is Kate. It is a great honor to participate in this online forum. Taijiman case happened in 1996. I'm thankful to have brothers and sisters to protect our home with free of weapons. Shifu told us to face this political crackdown with love, peace, and tolerance. With Shifu's teaching and uncomplaining guardianship with my brothers and sisters, they handcrafted with heart lotus. It's a flower. It symbolized the determinations as iron heart to safeguard our home. That's why I can grow up in safe and sound in this energy family when I was a teenager. At the time of Taijiman event, I have a story to share with you. One day after class, my classmate pointed to a newspaper with a huge deadline, Taijiman raising goblins, and asked me with a mocking and puzzled tone, "Are you raising goblins in Taijiman?" I told him with my steady voice, "What was written in the newspaper is not true." In retrospect, I see how tremendous the power of false media reports can be in deceiving the people. I was lucky in comparison to the injury suffered by other brothers and sisters, as well as the rejection of their families, friends, and careers. The brother and sisters who left Taiwan because they couldn't stand the media's pressure. All of these were caused by persecutor Hou Kuan-ren's mistake of abusing his power and violating the law. Even after more than a quarter century of waiting, this fabricated case has yet to be resolved. No one has been punished for issuing the wrongful tax bill and illegal auctioning of Taijiman's sacred lands, which were scheduled for the self-cultivation center. Former President Ma Ying-jeou, who was invited to participate to the flag presenting ceremony when Taijiman was invited to the Olympic Games in Sydney, and he said publicly, "Every time I see Taijiman, I see vitality, warmth, and love. We admire Dr. Hong's compassionate heart and hope that Taijiman will uphold this principle all over the world so that Taiwan can stand out and the world can come in. I have participated in Double 10th Days event celebration, waving Taiwan's flag in my hand, sending a heartfelt message of love and energy to wish our country a happy birthday. But what did our country give us in return? While we were sending love and warmth to the people of Taiwan and our guests and overseas Taiwanese from all over the world, the National Tax Bureau wanted to seize the academy with a tax bill that had been created out of nothing in order to destroy the warm and welcoming home that I had grown up with and that my Shifu and Shimu had worked so hard to build. The dark power of the government has never disappeared. Even though financial officials publicly promised to withdraw the tax bill, they have failed to keep their promises, and the fake tax bill has resulted in the auction of sacred lands in Miaoli. That day in Miaoli, the weather was so hot. but my heart was freezing. I witnessed the state seizing the sacred land that Shifu had prepared for us, and officials who had illegally auctioned off the land fleeing through the back entrance of the Miaoli office of the Hsinchu branch of the Administrative Enforcement Agency. Taiwan is no longer a democratic country with the rule of law. And officials have become licensed robbers with state power to confiscate the people's property. I also participate in Kaidagelan Boulevard parade and street protest in the hot sun or heavy rain to rectify the fabricated case. I remember one time it was windy and raining. That day was so cold. We stood in the rain with signs in our hands, hoping not only to rectify the Taijiman's fabricated case, but also to raise awareness among Taiwanese citizens about the importance of taxation and human rights, and to prevent Taiwanese people from being persecuted by the states. During one of the protests, a woman pointed the word private property in a banner and asked, "What does that mean?" I told her, "That's your house, car, land, and so on. That's all your properties." It is important to understand tax and legal knowledge, as well as your basic human rights, so you can defend your rights in case you are persecuted by the states. In 2021, we went to various counties and city councils to organize forums to advocate for human rights and tax and legal reform. One of these forums held in Yunlin County. On that day, when the deputy speaker mentioned our tax problems, he shook his head and said, "When we faced with tax problems, the NTB had a maximum power and we could only negotiate to pay less or to pay in installments. The NTB often uses the reasons that people and enterprises have to pay tax when they have income. As a result, Taiwan is in a high-risk tax environment. The majority of people were forced to negotiate or to pay a little amount of tax bill. When we were promoting the tax and legal reform, we met with village chiefs and they were disappointed that government did not put the people in mind. They agree that people should have conscience when they receive New Year's greeting cards. I truly hope that legislators and members of parliament can organize a tech and legal forum in this legislative assembly to promote tax and legal reform, to enhance the investment environment, to taxation in accordance with the law, and to penalize officials who violate the law by negotiating. This is what civic education is in actions. On our way to rectifying the fabricates of Taijiman, we encounter the tax and legal chaos in Taiwan, where illegal authorities have abused public power to persecute people's right to freedom of belief in the name of performance and tax bonuses. Sam Brownback, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom and co-chair of the IRF Summit 2021 said, "The purpose of government is to safeguard a people's freedom to select his or her own route to the future for his or her own soul. Apparently, Taiwan's government has failed to fulfill its governmental responsibilities in terms of religious freedom. It also damages Taiwan's international reputation. At an international press conference to resolve the fabricated case at the end of the last year, it was suggested that human rights is a way out of a democratic dilemma for the Taiwanese government, and that is the best and fairest way to improve Taiwan's human rights reputation to solve the Taijiman fabricated case. Many professionals and experts from across the world were focused on the wisdom of Taiwanese government. The UNESCO theme for this year is Changing Course, Transforming Education, which not only urged the government to rectify the fabricated case, but also to fulfill its responsibility to provide conscience education to all citizens. In order to keep up with the global trend, the government should implement human rights and the rule of law. This is a chance to make a difference in Taiwan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chen, for adding another angle to the suffering, the explanation, and the tale of the suffering of the Taiji men, Chifu and Dizi, through all these years, and to the level in which it is unbelievable, the whole story of this persecution. You were the last of our testimonial for today, and I do thank you. I do thank all of you, testimonial of this second part of the webinar, and I now lend over the floor to my colleague, Mrs. Daniela Bovolenta, an author at Peter Winter, who will draw some conclusion of this webinar. Daniela, Ms. Bovolenta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, rather than summarizing the excellent speeches and testimonies we had today, I would offer a short comment summarizing some common themes that emerged about the connection between the Taiji men case and the International Day of Education. First, Taiji men is a spiritual movement, but it is also an educational institution. Taiji men Dizi disciples who testify in our webinars always mention how their meeting with the movement's leader, Dr. Yun-Hao was profound educational experience. They learned how to overcome their limits and become better citizens. They learned to listen to conscience as the compass steering our life in the right direction. They learned to fight for justice. They learned that the word peace and love are not a remote dream, but a possibility. They learn by practicing Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation in the Taiji men academies, but many also learned by accompanying Dr. Hong in traveling throughout the world, meeting world leaders, asking them to ring the bell of world peace and love, presenting performances of traditional Chinese culture. All this is education. Second, authoritarian governments and corrupted bureaucrats hate independent education because it teaches citizens how to think freely without buying the official lies. The crackdown on Taiji men and other spiritual movements in 1996 was motivated by politics, as they were accused of not having supported the candidate of the ruling party, who eventually won the presidential election. However, if we look more deeply into the attitudes of those who engineered the crackdown, we see the fear of independent education and independent thinking, which is typical for those who are afraid of freedom. Third, resisting injustice is the best education of them all. I am sure Taiji men Dizi had already learned a lot about freedom, justice, and their conscience, but their theoretical knowledge went through a fiery test when they had to personally suffer injustice, slander, and persecution. They resisted, protested, and did not give up for more than 25 years. Theoretical education became practical education. Pilots can learn a lot about flying from books and simulation, but it is only when they actually fly a plane that their education as pilots is complete. Similarly, Taiji men had learned that the conscience may successfully resist injustice and corruption, but it was only when they were actually confronted by persecution that they understood the deeper truth of this lesson. Fourth, What we have seen in Taiwan and elsewhere, all the exceptional efforts by Taiji and Dizi to continue to resist, witness, protest, tell their stories to others, work with international scholars and human rights activists, organize events, travel, and always keep calm and smile is not only a process through which the Dizi educate themselves. In fact, they also educate others. They educate thousands who see them in the streets in winter or in summer, with good weather or bad weather. They educate the scholars who participate in these webinars and listen to their testimonies. They educate even politicians and the government bureaucrats they submit their complaints to. Although to be educated successfully, one needs to listen, and with bureaucrats, this is not always the case. Ultimately, this is what we are doing here, education. Through these webinars and through their proceedings we publish in Bitter Winter, we learn ourselves about conscience and freedom and about the Dizi who defend them. We hope many authors will learn too, and we hope against all hope that even the government's bureaucrats and tax officers will one day learn. With this, the webinar is concluded, and I thank all participants. As usual, there are final videos. The two first are called Spreading Law to 101 Nations and the 5 Wonderful Treasures. After these videos, we will excuse the speakers who have to leave, since the third video, the President's Side, Do You Tolerate Government Officials Who Violate the Law? It's a long and very detailed account of the Taijimen case. It will say on the YouTube recording of this event, and you are welcome to watch it when you will have time. Good evening, and thank you again.
Your heart.
Hello, online friends. Welcome to the All Talk Ending Fake Cases forum. I am today's host Argon. Tai Chi Yin and Yang is the foundation of ancient Chinese civilization, which lies behind the laws of nature and drives the development and changes of the laws of nature. Yin and Yang grow together, but how to use it is hidden profound wisdom and learning. Tai Chi Men is an ancient menpai, similar to school of Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation. It inherits the origin of Taoism and contains the highest philosophical thoughts of human beings. It has been secret and kept secret and not widely publicized. All are hidden world practice. It is the source of enlightenment of the mind. It's also a treasure trove of culture. Zhang Menren, Grandmaster of Tai Chi Men, Dr. Hong Taozu, from a young age, to have inherited the best techniques of the ancestors' internal secrets, knowing the nature of the universe, teach Dizi the wisdom of life philosophy, and to guide the Dizi in the dual cultivation of life, practice Qi and heart, physical fitness, cultivating the mind and nurturing the spirit, purify the mind. In order to achieve the unity of heart and Qi, return to nature, clear mind and see nature, the highest state of harmony between man and nature. Next, I'd like to share this video with you.
Qigong is not just mankind's most ancient sport. It transcends sport. From the level of the soul, it enhances the capabilities of the body and mind. Ancient Menpai, Shifu, and Dizi as one. Bequeath Taijima's splendid culture and achieve the overall health of body and soul. Zhang Menren, Grandmaster, teaches his Dizi, similar to students, the philosophy of yin and yang and life wisdom, guiding them to cultivate moral character and purify their hearts while strengthening physical, mental, and spiritual health. Zhang Menren guides his Dizi to reach the highest state of harmony, uniting the heart of man with the universe. It's a form of self-cultivation in everyday life, beginning from wishing to change oneself, to find satisfaction in life, wisdom in which yin and yang are balanced.
Energy Family!
Traveling the world, participating in more than 3,000 domestic and overseas events, visiting more than 300 cities in 101 countries, hosting more than 20,000 public lectures, promoting love and peace education and human rights at over 300 schools at home and abroad, sharing concepts of love and peace to resolve conflicts in the world, launching the movement of an era of conscience, enabling the butterfly effect of an era of conscience to catch on in 200 countries, generating a common response from over 3,000 organizations. Launching a cycle of goodwill, which has become condensed as a formidable energy. Changing the world. Turning the world upwards towards goodness. Forging a more beautiful life for everyone.
Personal experience is a very important part of Tai Chi Men practice. Because the true scriptures are not on paper, Shifu encourages his Dizi to treat work, life, and family as life training paths to train their minds, bodies, and spirits. RG used the wisdom of yin and yang that he learned in Tai Chi Men to save a company that was closing down and expanded its workforce tenfold, helping more than 300 families with their employment opportunities. Next, we will listen to his story.
I am a retired factory manager of a listed company. I am a Tai Chi Men Dizi and practice Qigong for more than 20 years. Shifu teaches his Dizi to practice Qi to cultivate their bodies and mind. Since the whole family has entered Tai Chi Men, we have a common thought and tend to act in the same way. Therefore, in addition to good health, our communicated with each other is also quite smooth, no obstacles, family get along well, happy like a fairy. Also the yin and yang philosophy wisdom of Tai Chi Men, also used in daily life and dealing with others. At school, my studied is business management with Research Institute. Therefore, the yin and yang philosophy is integrated with modern management, developed a set of philosophical thoughts on the management of Tai Chi yin and yang philosophy. Tai Chi is yin and yang, and it is also the universe, so in modern language, the philosophy of yin and yang is the philosophy of outer circle and inner circle. That is to say, to be a person of harmony and perfection, things should be orderly and square. Because any group big or small, how to operate, how to manage, nothing more than people and things. The people and practice have their highest guiding principles for both. What does not change is that there must be consummation between people, do things well, and follow standard operating procedures. The people and things will be successful. In concrete modern language, the method, attitude and spirit of dealing with people and things. People depend on leadership, and things depend on management. Because human nature does not like to be controlled by others, and things need to be led. Getting along with people depends on art. Dealing with things requires considerable skill. Be sensitive to people, be rational about things, face people with psychology, face things with physics, relative to people, things are absolute. Flexible to people, rigid to things. It is necessary to use the right rights for people, and to be pragmatic about things. To be metaphysical to people, to be metaphysical to things. It depends on policies for people, and requires institutional norms for things. As explained above, individuals in the workplace, using the above-mentioned elite management spirit of outer circle and inner square, and successfully listed the company's stock in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the stock listing requirements were quite strict. There must be a certain level of profit within 3 years. To list shares, individuals used the above-mentioned management spirit of outer circle and inner square. It also rescued a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. Originally there were only more than 30 employees, but now it has expanded to more than 300, also increased the employment population by 10 times. Prove that this philosophy of management is quite effective. How useful is the ancient wisdom of the Chinese nation? In 1985, 2 major criminal cases occurred in Taiwan. One is the murder of County Magistrate Liu Bangyu, the other is the murder case of the DPP Women's Association. 2 major cases have not been solved for a long time, so the government shifted focus. And under the guise of religious anti-crime to create a bigger storm, therefore, on December 19, 1996, the Tai Chi Men 1219 incident occurred. Ho Quanzhen could not find any evidence in the various academies of Tai Chi Men to be prosecuted for the trumped-up charge of raising goblins. This is an illegal indictment, but the IRS uses the indictment as the basis for taxation, and if there is no evidence of a crime was taxed improperly. It is wrong for the government to take the lead in breaking the law. The Supreme Court made a third verdict judgment on July 13, 1996. No deception, no tax evasion, no violation of the Tax Collection Act. The IRS ignored the judicial decision and continued to issue bills, which was quite disturbing to the people. For more than 20 years, Taiji men Dizi cannot practice Qigong with peace of mind and self-cultivation. What's even more hateful is that auction of the reserved site for the Taiji men practice dojo on 2020 and forcibly take back the state, occupy civilian property. Such unruly officials are really disgusting. The case has been delayed for 25 years and remains unresolved, President Tsai, in order to protect this democratic country ruled by law in Taiwan. Do you allow such a cabinet to break the law? Please take this matter seriously. Rehabilitate the Taiji men case known as Tax Law 228 as soon as possible and return my Taiji men innocence. Let us have a good self-cultivation practice environment.
If you don't treat the company as your own business, how can you achieve such success? The philosophy of yin and yang is unparalleled in the world, which is exactly what it means. Those who know how to use it can solve the difficulties in life or work. But we can hardly imagine such a good academy. He was framed by the unworthy prosecutor Ho Kwon-jen in 1985. Using false evidence, false witnesses, issuing false tax bills, more than 25 years. In the end, how did Ho Kwon-jen make false accusations against the Shifu and Dizi of Taiji men? And how did the people and experts and scholars point out the false law and the inconceivable?
The tax bills in violation of due process have been invalid from the very beginning. The Taiji men tax case originated from the unlawful indictment of prosecutor Yun-Hao, who transferred the case to the National Taxation Bureau, NTB, for taxation. The NTB knew that in the indictment of the prosecutor claimed the money in question was proceeds of fraud, but he also claimed the same money as tuition income from a crane school. His claims were clearly contradictory. The NTB issued the tax bills before the criminal court determined the nature of the income. The NTB imposed taxes and heavy penalties simply based on their indictment without fulfilling its duty to investigate the matter. This seriously violated due process of law.
Did the NTB complete its investigation? The criminal case was still ongoing, and the NTB had already sent out the tax bills. That violated due process. The dispositions in violation of due process were unlawful.
I've studied the Taiji men tax case for close to 2 years. I've written an article about the Taiji men tax case. I don't think I've seen more abuse of the right of due process in any situation than I have seen in the Taiji men tax case. It is not due process for the Ministry of Education to determine that Taiji men is not a cram school, and for prosecutors and tax authorities to disregard that determination. It is not due process for the NTB to issue tax bills and to continue to issue tax bills based on allegations of an indictment that have been thrown out in 3 separate criminal trials. It is not due process to have the interagency group get together from all of the different departments of Taiwan to finally address the persecution of Taiji men and agree on a process for doing that through a survey and then falsify the results of that survey. That is not due process. And it is not due process for the Taipei High Administrative Court and the Supreme Administrative Court to rule in favor in Taiji men and then do what? Send it back to the same individuals and authority that issued the tax bills in the first place and collected bonuses for those tax bills. It is not due process to be caught on this treadmill of remand by the administrative courts back to the Ministry of Finance and back again, and this never-ending treadmill where individuals at the ministry or any other tax officials can reissue the same bills time and time again, and causing taxpayers time, money, and concern for decades. I think that a 20-year ordeal is a violation of human rights. Justice delayed is justice denied. And to delay justice for 20 years and to still not have it, as we're sitting here today, is, in my mind, a denial of justice. And the thing that perplexes and even disturbs me is the fact that that justice has been denied and delayed by just a few individuals. It is appalling to me that those few individuals could hijack an entire government.
On July 13, 2007, the Criminal Division of the Supreme Court found Dr. Hong and his co-defendants not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or violation of the Tax Collection Act. The Supreme Court also determined that the red envelopes to Dr. Hong were gifts from Dizi and were tax-free income under Article 4, subparagraph 17 of the Income Tax Act. The group procurement of uniforms and other items through mutual assistance among the Dizi was not for profit sale and hence not a taxable event.
When deciding the first trial of the Taijiman case, I emphasize respect of human dignity, freedom of religion or belief, and freedom of thought. I think these values should be honored in tax law as well. The first, second, and third trials all rule the nature of the money in question as gifts. Then it should not be a tax as tuition for a cram school.
Because he thinks this is a respect for the master. It is a kind of gift. After the third instance of our court, we discussed in detail where the indictment is unacceptable. If the tax authority uses this indictment as the basis for taxation, I think it is questionable.
According to the decision issued by the Criminal Court of the Judicial System, the nature of the red envelopes given to the Shifu was determined to be gifts rather than income. Therefore, there is no income tax issue. The administrative agency has no reason to not evolve the facts determined in a criminal decision.
You can go to the Control Yuan's website and see that I have listed 7 corrections with respect to the NTB's handling of the Taijiman case. For each, the Tax Bureau's response was, "Oh, we made a mistake. I told the Finance Minister in 2011, I believe this case should be closed."
The Taijiman case of injustice was instigated by the prosecutor's office to divert the public's attention from 2 unsolved political murder cases. In the Taijiman case, the charges of fraud and tax evasion were contradictory to each other. The defendants were found not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or violation of the Tax Collection Act by the Supreme Court, and the state compensation for unjust detention was awarded. In 2007, the third instance court decision concluded that the red envelopes given by the Dizi to Dr. Hong were gifts and thus tax-free under Article 4, subparagraph 17 of the Income Tax Act. It was all clearly stated, but the NTB taxed Taijiman as a cram school and imposed taxes on the tax-free income. The NTB clearly violated the tax law. According to our tax law, gift tax is paid by the person given the gift, not by the recipient. The subject and object of taxation and the applicable law were all wrong. The original judgment on a criminal case must be annulled when it involves these kinds of errors. The administrative sanctions must be revoked, as they should not have existed.
The NTB taxed the tax-free gifts as Dr. Holmes' income. The NTB also levied sales tax on Dr. and Mrs. Home for the group procurement among the Dizi, which was not for profit sale and had nothing to do with Mr. and Mrs. Home. The NTB has imposed taxes on the wrong party and on non-taxable events. Its tax dispositions involve an error of fact and an error of law. Therefore, the tax bills have been invalid from the very beginning.
From July 13, 2007, the criminal court judged in the third instance, no deception, no tax evasion, no violation of the Tax Collection Act. Many experts, scholars and the people's representative have come forward to speak out for the Taiji men Shifu and Dizi. Shi Yesheng, a tax collector who cooperated with the false evidence, he found out with conscience at the end of his cancer. It was revealed that he cooperated with Ho Quan-jen to violate the certificate and issued an unrealistically high tax bill. The film caused an uproar when it came out for these 20-year-old secrets. Now, spread out in the sun, can President Tsai and Premier Su of the Executive Yuan still ignore it? If you regard the people of Taiwan as your own family, will you still be so indifferent? For 25 years, the black hair of many Taiji men Dizi has turned into gray hair. Mary, who has been practicing Taiji men Qigong for 27 years, also wants to express her heartfelt voice.
I am a Taiji man Dizi. It has been 27 years since I practiced and cultivated my mind at Taiji men. It's easy to lose my temper and negative emotions before I get started. After years of practice and change, I got on well with my family, more tolerant and understanding each other, always thinking of others. After a few years in such a peaceful and comfortable life, unexpectedly, the Taiji men case occurred on December 19, 1996. In Ho Quan-jen, on trumped-up charges, sued Taiji men for raising goblins. The IRS, using Ho Quan-jen's one-sided remarks, issued a tax bill without verification. The Dizi respect to the Shifu, the gift in Chinese culture, the ancient Shifu and Dizi, the ancient ritual is Hongbao, legally exempt from tax. In the third trial in 2007, it was determined no deception, no tax evasion, no violation of. All relevant detained defendants have been compensated by the state for compensation for miscarriage of justice and returned Taiji men to their innocence. However, the IRS officials still did not revoke the judicial decision. What's more abhorrent is that the executive office also forced the auction. Taiji men's land was confiscated and civilian property was seized. Taiwan is a democratic country under the rule of law. We should respect human rights. It is hoped that the relevant personnel of government agencies will have an in-depth understanding, rehabilitate tax injustices as soon as possible. Taiwan's judicial and tax systems have not been reformed. The people have lost confidence in the government. It is even more hoped that the fairness and justice of judicial taxation can be truly implemented in every people's life.
Thanks, Mary. If the wrongdoing of the offending officials, the government cannot correct it in time. After 25 years of delay, the grandma came forward and said, "May I ask the leaders of the country and the deans of ministries, what are your thoughts? Are you serving your people? Or are you blaming the people? How can a country prosper when the people suffer? It is the government's responsibility to relieve the suffering of the people. Hope you hear the voice of the people. Isn't 25 years long enough? Human rights from natural. But we have never felt that our human rights are valued. There are laws to follow to resolve unjust, false and wrongful cases. Let's see if the administrative organs have the conscience and the courage to remove the mistakes of the previous dynasty. So does the government. 228 incidents can be compensated by the state. the 4 defendants in the Taiji men case all compensated by the state for compensation for miscarriage of justice. Indicates that the government admits its mistake and gives compensation, but the land was illegally auctioned and nationalized. Isn't this amazing? Ask the president to show courage to resolve unjust, false and wrongful cases, let the people enjoy real human rights. Share with you this song, Human Rights for World Citizens. Thank you all.
Oh, you watched till the end. That's good.
No, we are still there. It's part of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was very good.
Yeah, it's